Hello photographers, today I'm going to share with you 6 common photography mistakes and how you can avoid them. So the very first mistake is a composition mistake that I see people making all of the time, which is shooting from what I call the natural human point of view. That is taking their camera and just saying, oh look, there's something interesting, and photographing it. We as humans get excited when we see something we want to photograph because we think it looks cool because it's an interesting subject, and we go, oh my gosh, look at that, that's great, I want to photograph it. And you grab your camera and you just look at that thing and you take a picture, and your picture looks like this, which just is not very good. Now you can very easily fix this just by changing the angle at which you shoot. One of the very easiest things to do is to get down and shoot at the level of the subject. That's going to bring us to a view that we don't normally see of that particular subject. And that immediately is going to engage our brains and make us more interested in your photo than just seeing it the way we always see it. And bonus composition tip, make sure you get close enough to your subject. This is pretty common knowledge, but sadly I still see it all of the time. Because when you approach a subject, your brain filter immediately zeroes in on the thing that you see, right? Like I walk up to this beautiful flower and my brain goes, oh my God, that flower is gorgeous, I want to take a photograph of it. And my brain, because I'm focused on that, is not noticing all of the other garbage in the background. Now I can get down at a low angle to shoot, but if I'm way far back, it's still not going to be a very good shot because there's going to be all of this extra stuff in the shot. And when people look at the image, they're not going to know what they're actually supposed to be looking at. Whereas if I get close to the subject and I get down at a low angle like this, then all of the other background stuff is almost immediately eliminated and the focus is put on the subject that drew you in and inspired you to take a photo in the first place. Mistake number 2 is also related to composition, because what I see photographers doing all of the time is not taking the time to scan their frame before they take the photo. Again, when we get excited, it's really easy to just grab the camera and take a picture of the thing that we want to photograph without stopping to look at what we're actually taking a photo of. If you just stop and take a moment to look at your frame before you shoot the photo, you can evaluate what is in your image and decide what should be there and what should not be there. And in that couple of seconds, you can maybe move the camera right or left, get in closer, or maybe you need to move farther back. Maybe you need to move up or move down. Whatever it is you need to do to make that photo better, if you pause before you shoot and scan your frame, you'll find the very common things that people point out as mistakes, like poles coming out of your subject's head, or tree branches coming in on the side where you don't want tree branches. The next mistake photographers often make is not shooting in auto. Now hear me out, you're probably thinking, what is this guy talking about? Aren't you supposed to shoot in manual mode so that you can get the best photos possible? Generally speaking, I 100% agree with that, and you absolutely should be learning how to use manual mode to get the most out of your camera and your photos. But auto mode is a great tool for 2 reasons. Number 1, as you are learning manual mode, you're not going to be immediately proficient and expert and able to shoot in manual mode all of the time. And what that means is when you need to get a shot, you should put the camera in auto mode and take that photo in auto. Once you've got something that you know is at least a decent photo, you can go back into manual mode and mess around to your heart's content to practice and learn. But if you need a shot, put the camera back in auto and get a shot. Now the secondary reason that auto mode is a great tool is if you have no idea what to do while you're in manual mode. If you have no idea what ISO or what aperture or what shutter speed you should be using, auto mode can give you a blueprint to use. All you need to do is put the camera into auto mode and you go ahead and take that picture. And after you've taken that photo, go into the review mode on the back of your camera and hit the info button. Now the info button is going to vary from camera to camera, but if you cycle through the info screens, you'll come to a screen that will show you the settings that the camera used in auto mode. It'll show you the ISO, aperture, and shutter speed that the camera used. You can then go into manual mode and use those settings as your starting point for shooting in manual. And from there you can experiment and try different settings and learn using auto as a guide. Now here's a bonus tip for when you're shooting in auto mode. Stopping that stupid pop-up flash from popping up. This is a mistake I see photographers make all of the time, which is holding that flash down while trying to take a photo and keeping the flash from going off. That's not going to work in auto mode. The picture isn't going to be great. It could potentially damage your camera if you do that over the long term. There's a very easy way to disable your pop-up flash when you are shooting in auto mode so that you can take an auto mode photo without the flash going off. And all you have to do is go to your mode dial and turn it until you are in the no flash auto mode, which looks like this. Now you can shoot all day, all night, whatever, and that pop-up flash will never pop up on you. Mistake number 4 is not taking the time to learn about light. When you are learning about photography, when you're learning about your camera, it's easy to ignore the most important thing, which is actually learning about and understanding light. And I get it, right? You're trying to figure out what the heck ISO, aperture, and shutter speed are. You're trying to understand all of the buttons and dials on your camera. But here's the thing. Your camera is a tool for capturing light, and understanding light and how it works will absolutely make you a better photographer. Understanding light allowed me to go from taking photos that looked like this, which were fine, to taking photos that look like this, which are amazing. All because I know about how light works, and I can use my camera and use light to make the image look exactly the way I want it to look. Now, how do you study light? The easiest way to do it is to start small and simple. Get yourself a little statuette, a figurine, a golf ball, an egg, anything, and just set it up on a table, and then grab yourself a light. It could be a flashlight. Heck, you can use the light on your iPhone and just shine it all around your subject. Move it back, move it close, put things in front of it, try different stuff, and look at what happens to your subject when you change the light. That will give you a foundation that you can use to start learning even more about light. The other way to learn more about light is to study other photographs. And when you study the photographs, here's what you want to look for. Take this photo as an example right here. If you look at the highlights, you can understand where the light's coming from. And if you look at the transition between the highlights and into the shadows, you can tell what sort of light was used. In this image right here, the transition between the highlights into the shadow areas is very smooth. It's very soft. What this tells us is that this was a soft or a large light source, because generally speaking, the larger a light source is, the softer the light is, and the smoother the transitions into the shadows are. We can also tell where this light was coming from, because if we look at the image, the light is lighting up the camera right side of the subject's face. If you look at those highlights, you can see that the light was to camera right and elevated slightly above the subject, pointing down just a little bit. So when you study images, look for these clues to figure out how and what kind of light was used to create that image. And then look for these qualities of light when you are shooting to use them to your advantage. Mistake number 5 is buying a bunch of extra stuff that you don't need. This is my first camera. It is the Canon Rebel XT and the kit lens that came with it. And this was my entire kit for the first 7 or 8 years of my photography. It is so easy to get sucked into this idea that you need things like a tripod and a zoom lens and filters and a flash right away and all of these other things, but you're just gonna end up wasting money if you buy stuff right away like that, because number one, you don't really know what you're buying yet, right? Like, you just bought a camera and you don't even know how to use this thing yet. Now you're gonna buy a bunch of other stuff that you don't really know how to use. And number two, all of that stuff is going to get in the way of you learning how to use the most important thing, which is your camera. So if you just work with what you have, work with the camera, work with the lens that you have, and shoot with it and get used to it and turn it into an extension of your body so that you can operate this thing with your eyes closed, so that it becomes a part of you, so much so that you fully understand how it works. Once you get to that point, that's when you can start thinking about buying new gear, because then A, you're going to understand the limitations of what you have, and B, you're going to know what you actually want or need to be able to do the things you want to do. And finally, the sixth mistake that I see photographers making all of the time is jumping right into shooting raw. Now, this is in large part the fault of many photographers out there who say, well, you should shoot in raw because raw is better because you get all of this additional information and blah, 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 blah. And if you don't know what raw is, it's very simple to understand. RAW is a file type that your camera produces that is similar to the negative you got if you shot with film. You had to take a negative, you had to take a film negative to a developer or into your darkroom, and you had to actually develop that before you could create a print, before you could actually get an image. And a RAW photo is the digital equivalent of that. It is all of the raw data that your camera collects when you take an image, saved into a file with no developing or image processing applied to it whatsoever. In order to get an image out of your RAW file, you have to sit down at the computer, load that up into some editing software, edit it, and then create an image file that you can actually use. And if you're still learning how to use your camera, well, you probably haven't taken the time to learn how to use editing software yet, which means you're gonna have files that are completely unusable to you. Now, in the long run, I do think that you should learn about RAW and try RAW when you're ready for it. And if you want the option to use RAW right away, then what I suggest you do is set your camera to capture both RAW files and JPEGs. JPEGs are common image files that you can use right away out of your camera, and pretty much every camera out there will allow you to capture both RAW and JPEG together. If you do that from the beginning, you can set those RAW files aside until you're ready for them, but you can use those JPEGs right away without getting overwhelmed with all of these additional editing steps that you have to do if you just shoot in RAW. So those are 6 mistakes that I see photographers making all of the time and how you can avoid them to improve your photography. If you have any questions about any of this, let me know down in the comments, and while you're down there, share some mistakes that you've learned so that other photographers can learn from you. Now, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel. When you do, make sure you hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss a single one of my videos. And then you better get out there and take some damn photos. I'll see you in the next one. Bye. Yes, I am sunburned. It's been 3 days since I recorded the bulk of this video, and then I went to a photography conference and burned my noggin.